the Bureau of Development Services. I'm Code and Policy Analyst. Welcome this afternoon. Thank you everybody for being here. This is a follow-up lunch and learn to the original lunch and learn on our new asbestos and lead-based paint rules. And we're going to go a lot more in depth. The last one was more of an overview of the requirements generally, and we're going to go into much more in-depth presentation now that the regulations have been in place for a little bit. So I'm going to start with just a really broad overview, and then we're going to have presentations by permitting services and site development. I'm going to have them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Tracy Nisler, and I'm with Permitting Services, and I will be discussing what it takes to get that permit in the door. What is your submittal? What should your submittal include, and what the review process is like.
My name is Elliot Scott. I'm in Permitting Services with Tracy. I'll be talking briefly about posted notice requirements as a part of the new rules before we hand it off to Jeremy.
Jeremy Russell, Senior Site Development Inspector. I'll be talking about the demo plan, how to fill one out, what we're seeing out in the plans that are causing people to get check sheeted, enforcement, and inspections.
And I would just note, we have a lot of material to get through. We anticipate it'll take about 45 minutes for all of us to get through our slides, and then we'll have about 20 minutes at the end for questions.
Thank you, Elliot. Okay, so starting off on this is, you'll hear the term Senate Bill or SB 871. That just refers to the law that the state passed that allows local jurisdictions like Portland to adopt regulations to mitigate the impacts of asbestos and lead-based paint in residential demolitions. So Portland, we adopted our specific ordinance, and for us, it applies to all structures with 1 to 4 dwelling units and any detached accessory structures on the sites, regardless of the zone. That's a little different than some of our other residential demolition notice requirements. So we just want to make sure that everybody realizes that even if you're on a commercial site and it's a single family, these requirements still apply. And we're using the building code definition of accessory structure, which is 200 square feet to 3,000 square feet. And the requirements also apply if the only thing that you're demolishing is that accessory structure. And these regulations took effect July 1st. The general requirements are first that you have to designate a demolition manager. That person is responsible for overseeing the project. You also have to have a demolition plan that does dust and site control. And this is really high level. Jeremy's going to go into the specifics, so I just give you a context before we go into it. You can't conduct any mechanical demolition activities if the wind speed's over 25 miles an hour. So that's basically if you're using heavy machinery. And then you can't get a subsequent building permit on that site until the demo permit is final, and that's a very different process from what we used to have for this. So the demolition manager, that person is designated by the property owner. That person is basically the city's BDS's contact person, and they're responsible for implementing and overseeing the project. They have to either have the required asbestos certifications, which is one of these three, the accredited inspector, certified worker, or certified supervisor, and they either have to be on site during all of the mechanical demolition and deconstruction activities, or they have to designate somebody with those accreditations to be on site. And there is an exception that we'll talk about later, that you don't have to do that if you've done a comprehensive asbestos inspection and testing and you've done that abatement. We put that in, thank you, Jeff, because there was some concern that having to have somebody on site the whole time wasn't really productive if you could show that you've done full testing. You also either have to have, the demolition manager either has to have the lead certifications, or again, that certified person has to be on site. And this last one is key. They are a responsible party in terms of enforcement. So they're really gonna be one of the main people that we look to for enforcement on this. And this PowerPoint is gonna be available on our website, and these links you'll be able to go to directly to get to some of the information on these asbestos and lead-based paint certifications. The key components of the ordinance are lead hazard reduction, which is basically removing all of the painted materials from the non-load-bearing exterior surfaces and putting them in plastic, and then doing dust suppression, which is basically wetting the site, and then doing the debris containment so that, you know, once you wet things, they don't go off site. There is an exception if you do full deconstruction, but it doesn't get you out of all the requirements. And this is the definition of full deconstruction. I'm not going to read it. It's there and it's in our ordinance. If you do the full deconstruction, you're not required to remove the exterior painted surfaces, wet the material, or monitor the wind speed. But you do still have to do any horizontal and vertical plastic protection and wet anything that you mechanically transfer or load. We also have an exception for unsafe or hazardous structures. You know, sometimes the structure is in really bad condition, and we wanted to create an exception so that, or an exemption in case that's the situation. But to get that exemption, you either have to have a letter from a structural engineer or hazardous materials professional, or you have to provide evidence that BDS has an open code compliance case, and then you have to have supporting documents of whichever one of these you do. And then the last piece of this that's new is, instead of having one demolition inspection, there are now 3. There's a pre-demolition inspection, a during demolition inspection, and a post-demolition inspection. And again, Jeremy will go over those more. And I will turn it over to Tracy.
First, before I start to talk about the intake submittal and the requirements prior to inspections, I want to talk about new construction real quick for a moment, because I want to make sure that everyone understands how this affects new construction. So anytime there is a building on a site that you're going to be building on any kind of new construction after the demolition, if Senate Bill 871 is triggered, it's important for you to know and to plan ahead that your demo permit has to be finalized prior to the release of any new construction permit. So I just want to make sure, I don't know if we're going to touch base on that too much today, but I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Okay? So most of us are probably familiar with demo permits. So again, we're just focusing on the new requirements that have been added to demo permits based on Senate Bill 871. So we're going to talk about your application. What should your submittal look like? What do you need to get it taken in, get those intake fees, and get it to the review process? And then we'll talk about review and issuance as well. So again, if you had a chance to grab a demo packet, we're going to be talking about some new forms with the Bureau, and the demo packets have samples of those forms in there that we're going to be discussing. So again, focusing on those new requirements with when you realize that Senate Bill 871 is going to be triggered on your project. So first of all, building permit application. You are also required to bring in an asbestos survey. Asbestos survey cover sheet needs to be included, and again, that's a new form that we'll be taking a look at in just a moment. That's been created by BDS. Demolition plan form, again, that's another form, and that Jeremy will be going into detail about what we expect to see on that form, but the form does need to be completed. And then your 4 sets of plans, scaled. Erosion control plan, so if you are in a simple site, flat lot, not a lot going on to it, a lot of times the simple site erosion control form plan can cover any erosion control needs. And then when you're dealing with a property that has a cesspool on site, then we also need to make sure that you've included your on-site sewage disclaimer. So again, some of these forms are already existing. The 2, 3, and 4 are some of the new things that you'll see as part of the Senate Bill 871. So then sometimes when, for demolition, you'll need, if it's been determined based on your asbestos survey that asbestos was found, we need a closeout letter saying what was found, what kind of asbestos. Along with that asbestos closeout letter, that would go along with your ASN form, number 3, identifying what kind of asbestos was included and how you're mitigating it. Also, then we would, if you're dealing with a single family home and or a duplex, you would need your owner's intent to demolish form. That's not new. If you've determined that your structure was built prior to 1979 and your structure does not have lead paint, then you need a form saying that you need your lead testing report saying that there is no lead paint as part of the building structure. Also, if it's been deemed that that the building is hazardous, so maybe you have a dangerous building case set up with code compliance with the Bureau, or you have a letter from a structural engineer or a certified inspector saying that it is dangerous, then the requirements with lead paint are waived. Some of those requirements, and Jeremy can get into more detail on that. And then the future fill and compaction form is, again, if you have a basement and you want to retain that cavity because you're just going to come back in and you're going to build a new house on that, then you would supply that form also. And just remember, when you're taking down a single family home and there's a basement and you want to retain that cavity, that's only if you're going to build another single family home on top of it. If you plan on building commercial apartment building, this form does not cover that. And then finally, if your demolition, number 2, I haven't hit on that yet, but if your project does not trigger Senate Bill 871, we're going to make sure that you also submit your SB 871 acknowledgement form. This is what your SB 871 acknowledgement form looks like. It's important that second screener is going to make sure that this is filled out, because this is how you're telling us that it's not triggered. And that's part of the packet as well. This is your asbestos, so you have to submit your asbestos survey, and this is your asbestos service cover sheet. And this is your demolition plan form. So this is this needs to be completely filled out, including your narratives. And Jeremy, again, will go into more detail on what some of the things that he expects to see on the form. Just your basic site plan. It's important that you have a scale site plan. You have your corner elevations. We want to know if you're on a sloped lot. We want to know where the house is on the lot. Also, we want to know what kind of existing buildings are on the lot, as well as just the building that you're taking down, or if there's any other buildings on the adjacent properties that are close to the property lines. And now I'm going to hand it over to Elliot. We'll talk about notification.
All right, Nancy asked me to remind everyone, if you didn't sign in on your way in, if you could sign in on the way out, so you have a log of who visited today. So again, to recap, so after you've assembled all your application materials, you came into the Development Service Center, checked in at first screen to get in line, went through permit setup at second screen, where we verified that all of these materials that Tracy just went over were present with your application. And you go through an intake review with planning and zoning and life safety. At that point, you're ready to pay your fees and drop the permit off for intake. So if SB 871 requirements apply to your demolition project and you've assembled all this information here, it's going to be taken in for review. So that's another change, that just to be clear about how demos will work now versus before July 1st. So after the plans are taken in for review, there's a couple things that'll happen in short order before inspections get to their demo plan review. Generally, this is going to happen the next business day or the day after we take the plans in for review. So posted notice is one of the requirements that's always been present with the demolition permit in the city of Portland. The language has been cleaned up a little bit and clarified, as well as increased in terms of the posted notice requirements for demolition permits. We're going to make it's a little bit simpler to understand, because instead of having a relative map of where you post the door hangers, where the property is, you need to post them within 300 feet, and that's an absolute measure. So The day after we take the plans in for review, you'll get an email from a permit technician that has a couple attachments along with it. We'll refer you to the code that you can reference about what the language is about your posted notice requirements. We'll also provide you a map of where those properties are within 300 feet, so you're not guessing and trying to take a string from your demo site to measure exactly where you need to get these door hangers. We'll give you 75 door hangers when you first get your permit set up when you walk into the permit center. If there happen to be a lot of smaller properties that get caught within 300 feet, you can come back to the permit center at any time to grab some more, or you can print more from our website. When we send you that email the next day, there will be a link to the door hangers so you can print more if you want to do that from home. And then the timing of when you post the door hangers is important. There is a particular time window associated with when you post them relative to when you actually start demolition activity. Jeremy will be following up on that, or other inspectors that are visiting the site when you call for your first inspection. So you don't want to go post these as soon as you get them handed out to you when you set up your permit, in case it goes over that 2-week window for when you're actually starting your activity and you have your site prep to start. So you're probably going to be holding on and doing that posting closer to when the permit's getting approved to issue to make sure that you don't have to post a second time. Then the other thing that's going to happen after we take the permit in for review is the asbestos survey is going to be scanned and posted online. Typically for most permits with BDS, documents aren't available and scanned until the permit process is complete and they're all approved sets. The asbestos survey is something that we're going to be posting as soon as it's dropped off and comes in for review so the public can view it. So you'll navigate from portlandmaps.com to the permit number or the property address, and associated with the permit detail view, if you scroll down, you'll see that documents link. If you're familiar with Portland Maps, you know where to find it, but it'll be down at the bottom of the list. Those are the things that are going to happen right after intake, and then you'll have some other intake reviews. It might be more than just Jeremy, but Jeremy's going to go over the site controls plan review check that's new with SB 871.
Afternoon. Before I start, I just want to thank everybody who's gone through the permitting process right now for their patience with the process. It's new, we stumble, but we can get through this if we all keep our heads and stay together and hopefully improve the process as we go. I also want to introduce some of our site development team that will be doing inspections that you'll be working with. So Shiklon is here, Chike, and Derek. I don't know if Derek made it back from inspections. There he is.
Hi guys.
And absent is Jason Vinci. He's out on paternity leave, but he'll be back. So these are the people you'll be dealing with on inspections. So the first thing we're going to go over is the demolition plan. We are constantly improving this process and these documents. So the demolition plan, we're going to be filling in these blanks. And the one thing we've been seeing is there is a lot of blank permits coming in, a lot of blank plans. And I think that's just based on we are not giving enough information as to what we expect to see. So we're currently redlining and updating that. I worked on that this morning. So if you struggle with that, we're addressing it. So we expect to see the description of the buildings, like we talked about earlier, the site controls that will be on site, the type of containment that's going to be needed, the spray method, and the monitoring process. This is the actual form, so we'll have the permit applicant information there. When we see the description of the existing buildings on site, we want to see some information like it's a single-family residence, 2-story, 2,000 square feet, and the bonus for our inspectors, because we'll be using this plan to do that inspection, is there painted wood siding? Is it brick? Is it painted wood frame, windows, and doors? Those are things we're going to be looking for on site. Site controls. So expected start date, we see a lot of these coming in that say the expected start date is the day that they put in the application. That's not going to work. You should plan for the review time, and you should plan for at least your 3 days of posting time for that as well. The containment, so what we're looking for on containment is the lead hazard reduction. This is the plastic that you're going to lay down on the ground, either horizontally or go vertically with the plastic if you can't get your 10 feet between the property line. So what we'd like to see here, for example, on this project, we would say the east, west, and south property line is greater than 10 feet between the structures. So horizontal containment is fine, and we're going to use non-woven geotextile for that, or a 6 mil plastic. That's the kind of information we want there. The north perimeter, though, this structure is too close to the property line, so we're going to have to do horizontal and vertical. So, horizontal and vertical on the north perimeter. So In this example, we're using row cover. It's a deluxe, very lightweight fabric that you can easily put up, staple to the staple, or put up on top of the building. And we want to know that when our inspectors come out, they're going to look at that plan and they're going to say, "Are you doing what you said you were going to do in your demo plan?" Small changes are fine, things happen, but this is going to help us out to speed up the inspection. The dewatering. So anytime you're going to discharge, and this is a current rule, this isn't new, but if you're discharging from any project into the right-of-way or into VDS's assets, which is catch basins and lines, you need to have a batch discharge permit, especially in this situation because we're dealing with lead and other pollutants. They may require some filtration if you have to pump out into the right-of-way or to our system. So if you are going to do that, you're going to have to contact VDS, get a permit, and provide us with that permit number. Pedestrian protection is required when you're within 4 feet where people will be walking. So if you have your equipment staged within 4 feet of the right-of-way, we want to make sure those people are protected with something like an 8-foot chain link fence. Also, if you have an excavation that's that close to the right-of-way, you're going to need to do protection as well. Moving on to the monitoring process, this is what the demo manager will be doing. We want to know what you're going to be doing on site. The lead asbestos, so for example, lead asbestos certified demo manager is going to be on site during all mechanical demolition activities. During the demolition, the DM will monitor the structure for any suspect ACM that wasn't found during the original survey. And this is one of the key things that made this come into play, because we were seeing a lot of asbestos surveys coming in, and they were limited surveys. So that means they just walked in, saw the material that was there, but there was no destructive search for other materials. So if you've ever worked in this area, you can pull down a wall, maybe you'll find some wiring that has asbestos in it. We weren't catching those on those limited surveys. So during those demolitions, all that material was just getting lost. So this is the destructive survey. The DM is going to be sitting there watching to see if there's anything that they need to stop the project and contain that properly and get rid of it. So also, we're going to say during the lead-containing materials removal, the demo manager is going to ensure that the proper containment cleanup procedures are used. You're going to be looking at it, making notes in your documentation, and then you're also going to be, prior to beginning mechanical demolition daily, or the demo manager is going to check the wind speed. You're going to be required to have a handheld anemometer or some type of wind speed monitoring device. Record that information so that we know that the wind speeds aren't up. You can start demo, and then throughout the day you'll check those wind speeds and note those speeds throughout the day. So demo manager will monitor the site for visible emissions of dust that's being generated during activities. The wetting procedures should take care of this, but sometimes, with the way we've written the regulations, we're given a lot of leeway for what can be used on that area for dust control. So if you are a demo manager and you're starting to do mechanical demolition and you notice a little bit of dust coming off the site, and you stop that demolition, write down what happened, and write what you're going to do to change it. This is key, because if we get a complaint and we come out and we don't see that anything was done because there was a problem, there's going to be a little bit of an issue there. But if you're monitoring and you're saying what you're doing, that's what we're going to go to, and that you're following those. So monitoring process, this is what we expect to see. Debris management, you have a choice of direct loading or stockpiling. If you're stockpiling, you want to make sure that you have some containment under those stockpiles, plastic, 6mm plastic, and then you're covering those stockpiles at the end of the day. Water source, so for your wetting, you need to have either a water truck, a construction meter, which would be a hydrant, or a private meter. So we need to know where that's coming from. And the spray method, so the spray method is going to be different for every project. It's you're going to come up with what works for your company, what works for your crews, but it needs to be effective. And it cannot be a simple water hose and a nozzle. That will not work. We will not accept that as a note on this form. It's laid out in the admin rule and in the code that that's not going to be good enough, so don't turn in a plan that just says hose and spray. But for the spray method, we want you to tell us what you're going to do. All exterior building surfaces and equipment are going to be wetted directly prior to the beginning of demolition. If you're working within vertical containment areas and you want to wet those areas to assist in dust control, that's fine. But just give us an idea of what you're going to be doing. Stockpile material is going to be wetted. Those are all the rules. And the equipment's really important. Let us know what you're using for equipment. Is it going to be a pressure washer? Is it going to be, construction fire hose with a nozzle? But the equipment, please don't cut and paste from this. It's not going to be the same for every project. If you're doing a small garage that's slightly over 200 square foot, you may be able to get your wetting with a pressure washer. You may be able to get your dust control with that pressure washer. But that is not going to fly for a 2-story, 2,000 square foot structure. We need to have everything interior wetted, and we need to have everything exterior wetted, and you're not going to be able to do that with a pressure washer. So they'll take a little research on the demolition manager side and the contractor side to start what works, and part of this process of our inspection is documenting what works, so in the future we can continue, when you have any questions, we can say, well, we've seen this work, and it's effective, and it's inexpensive, so you may want to try this. So documenting this information for the back end, say a year from now, it's very important for us. The inspection process. This is not different than the erosion control inspections that we have now that are required for all ground disturbing activity. The same type of inspections, we're just looking at a few different things. We'll have a number 200 inspection, which is called pre-construction erosion control and site controls. An interim inspection, that's during the demolition, and the permanent measures, which is after the demolition is done. Now, these are the inspections that our team will be doing. There may be additional inspections like the building final, the 288 or 299. So check your plans and make sure you're following those as well. Yes, ma'am. So,
Heidi, did you want to say anything about the required tree preservation inspection that would precede any of those on sites where there's applicable trees to be preserved?
right, so if, just like with every other project, if there's tree protection that's required, you can call that in before we start any other demolition or disturbance. So that's a number 507 inspection. That's still an issue on just regular construction sites. So demolition sites, let's get that taken care of first thing. Get out, put your tree protection up, call in the 507, get that approval, and then call in your 200 when you're ready to start demolition. Thanks, Jill. So the pre-construction inspection, what we're going to do is, this is the inspection, you call this in for the day that you expect to start. The morning that you're ready to go and your crew's on site, this is when we should be doing this inspection, not 3 days prior to, and you're going to come back. We want to know that the measures that we're requiring are on site and ready to go, and the process is going to be followed that day. When we walk away from this inspection and give you approval, we're expecting that demolition is going to start right away. So that's the appropriate time to call in this inspection. So what we're going to do when our inspectors come out, we're going to review the demolition plan with the contractor and the demolition manager, and we're going to make sure everybody's on the same page as to what you said you were going to do. That's what we expect you to do. And then erosion and sediment control measures should be in place, and if you have questions about those while we're there, we can go over that and say, maybe give some guidance on what we need to do for erosion control. The same requirements apply for these demolitions that apply, so catch basin protection, perimeter controls, those are all still required. Nothing different there. We're going to photo document the inspectors or the credentials of the person on site. So you're going to show us your lead certification. You're going to show us your asbestos certification. We're going to document those and put those in our system so that in the future, if we see your name again and again, we're not having to do this and we already have your credentials in. Trying to be smart about all this. We're going to review the site plan form, again, erosion control. We're going to ensure that all the initial site controls are in place and that the items are going to be inspected. We're going to be looking for the erosion control, the wind speed meter. We want to see that in your hand, that you have it. Watering and dust suppression system. If you say you're going to have a pump truck with a fire hose, we're going to look to see is that in place, because you're going to have it. The soil and dust protection, that should be installed and ready to go at this inspection. When we walk up on site, that vertical and horizontal should be in place. There are some cases where you can't get to that horizontal maybe for a few days, but we'll catch that on our 205, so we need to know that. We need to come back and verify that that vertical has been installed. Debris containment, we're going to check to make sure it's either being wrapped up or your container is covered in plastic and has a cover for it. And we're going to make sure that your signage is posted. So you'll be getting this nice, you probably saw it when you walked in, big sign that needs to be out there and posted for that. We have sometimes that we are bringing that sign out and giving it to you. That's going to be written down that we provided that sign, and we'll check to make sure it's posted during our next inspection. And we're going to establish the date and time of the 205. Now, you don't have to call that inspection in. Our inspector is going to schedule that for you. You're going to say it may take us a day and a half to get this thing through, so we're going to come back midday next day and just make sure everything's going okay. Make sure everything's being followed. We may check in with neighbors and say, have you had any dust problems? But that's the that's the reason for that 205, is during the demolition, make sure everything's going well. And again, it's not just to bug the contractors, but also to know that what we need to approve on for our inspections and our forms and our requirements. So during the interim, we're going to just make sure that the demo plans are being followed, that you're monitoring the wind, all those requirements are being met. We're going to ensure that erosion control plans are being followed. We're going to verify that any contaminated materials are properly contained, that would be wrapping and putting in a dumpster or drop box. We're going to verify the appropriate corrections, revisions are being made to the erosion control plan. Things change a lot on sites. You may be able to get a piece of equipment in one way that disturbs the soil, then next day you're not going to be in that area. So you may need to apply some type of erosion control to that area after you've made that disturbance. So we're making sure that things are being phased in and followed as required. Can we do questions?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We're gonna, let's see, where we verify that the responsible party is conducting and documenting your inspections and your processes. If something went wrong, we want to see that deficiency noted and what you did to correct it. It's a pretty simple process, the same as the erosion control requirements currently. The permanent measures inspection, project's over, we're coming out to make sure everything's been cleaned up, removed. We'd like to see the drop box offsite, but that's not always the case. At that point, we just want to make sure it's covered and it's not going to be leaking and taking on water during our rainy season. So all temporary lead hazard reduction BMPs have been removed, so your plastic's cleaned up. All the public discharge points are clean, and all site debris has been removed, and also all exposed soil is covered with some type of stabilization. Just like with erosion control inspections, that's going to be mulch, rock, compost, something that's in our manual that's stated as an acceptable temporary stabilization. We do have some exceptions that we can work with if you're moving directly into buildings. Say we're doing that inspection, you say we're staged and ready to go to start this next day. We can make some exceptions for moving on without having to apply stabilization. But that's going to be dependent on, is that permit actually ready to be, start building on or to be issued. So we're going to go into best management practices, signage, removal of exterior surfaces, wetting, wind speed monitoring, and erosion control. Yes. So the sign must be posted. That's the example of the sign. Your information, don't just post the sign, actually fill it out. We have this issue with erosion control signage right now. It just gets posted, nobody puts in the permit number. Here's a reason why those spots are there. Put that information in, please. So removal of painted surfaces. It's kind of a good example of what you might see if someone chooses to wrap every individual, the individual planks that they're taking off or the materials. They would lay it out on plastic, tape it up, burrito it, put it in the dumpster, drop box, and move on. The other option is to just line your entire drop box and put everything in there and then wrap that material at the end of the day. So that's what we're getting at there. The horizontal containment, this is what we're going to look for. This is what we expect to see in place at that 200 inspection. Now in our code, we do allow for geotextile to be used instead of 6 mil plastic. We had some concerns during the draft meetings that the plastic may get slick during the wintertime. It's not safe. So we did go ahead and make an exception for geotextile. But when you're choosing geotextile, you want to make sure it's a non-woven geotextile. And that also it has some type of separation and containment. We think that's going to be a good idea and that it's going to work because honestly, when we look at this plastic and our wet weather here, you can just imagine we're containing everything and we're catching everything on the plastic, but then it starts to rain, everything's just going to run right back off. So hopefully we can start getting some details drawn up, and once we start seeing what's working and what people need to do, we can start having some standard detail. My idea would be to provide straw wattle or some type of compost berm around the edge of this, so if we do get a rain event, that's going to stop it from running off and becoming polluted off-site. So we'll work on that, actively work. But if you're meeting this requirement, we're good to go. So vertical containment, a lot of questions on how are we doing vertical containment. Any way you want. It just needs to be effective. It needs to contain the area that you're pulling down the materials off the building that could possibly have lead or do have lead. You can move this around as you go if you're doing small sections. We've had a couple of inspections so far where they've decided to use 2 extendable ladders put their plastic on top of that, laid across the building, and just move that around the building as they work. Perfectly fine. We don't have to see the entire building, we'll see that at the 205 it's being done. So, come be creative, show us what works and what's effective. The 6mm plastic is optional. I know that stuff is a little bit more expensive, so we're exploring other options like the row cover. During our classes, we had one of the guys who's been in the business for about 20 or 30 years who had a lot of reasons why he loved that row cover. Not only because it's cheap, but because when you have guys working in this area in the summertime, you're basically creating a sauna. It's not comfortable for them. It may not be safe. So the row cover does let a little bit more air come through. It's lighter weight. If you're trying to protect landscaping, that row cover, that's exactly what it's made for, to let that breathe. So you're not just killing all the plants during your demolition. Wetting. On the market, there are some, there are some products that are made for exterior or outside demolitions for wetting. We're not requiring anyone to use any specific type of wetting system, but it does need to be effective, and it does need to make sense that that's what you're doing. Again, like I said, if you're doing a 2,000 square foot house, we're not going to expect a single hose or a pressure washer to be effective. So you want to think about things like the atmospheric conditions. Where's the wind coming from? When you stage your guys for wetting, should they be standing on the south side of the building if the wind's coming from the north? And we're wanting to protect that property line and that dust coming off. So atmospheric conditions, the particle size. This kind of started to get into the weeds a little bit when we were talking about this, when we were writing these rules. Particle size is important, but again, if you're giving enough water to the project and you're keeping everything wet, then that shouldn't be too much science, and then you're not going to have to be an engineer to figure all that out. And the angle and velocity of water flow, if you're just spraying things straight at the building, that's not going to work. Just give it some time, you want to bring that dust back down whenever you hit, so get a nice angle on that. And we're going to do a little video about wetting.
As of July 1, 2018, the City of Portland requires dust control measures to be used during demolitions. These measures should be taken for all demolitions of structures with 1 to 4 dwelling units built before 1978 and the accessory structures on those sites. This video shows an established best industry practice for the wet method of dust suppression during demolition. This practice involves pre-wetting the structure being mechanically demolished, wetting during demolition, and wetting during material loading. Other best management practices are required, so please reference Portland's City Code and Administrative Rules for specific requirements. First, water is applied to building surfaces prior to demolition activities, as well as continuously during the knockdown phase to prevent dust generation. During the knockdown phase, water is applied directly to the materials being crushed to prevent dust generation. The water should be dispersed from a point close to the position of dust generation in order to be most effective in both dust suppression and minimizing the volume of water used, thereby limiting runoff containing lead particles. Finally, water is applied to debris during handling, crushing, and loading. Ideally, this practice results in 0 visible dust emissions. However, if visible dust is generated, adjust the wetting techniques to control emissions by increasing the amount of water or increasing the area over which the water is applied. The goal is to use the least amount of water possible while still controlling dust emissions. To learn more about dust and site control measures, read Demolitions Administrative Rule 3.9 and Portland City Code 24.55.205.
And thanks to our communications team for making a nice, well-edited video. So I think that kind of gives everybody a better idea of what we're expecting to see for dust control. Was kind of a high, lofty idea that some people hadn't seen, but I think this is a good tool, and this will be available online for new contractors to look at. I thought I got theme music. So before we go into this section on enforcement, I just want to take a second to talk about our philosophy for enforcement inspections. I've been, for the last 13 years, I've been doing erosion and sediment control and stormwater inspections in a lot of different capacities for small towns and here in Portland. But our philosophy on enforcement is that education should always come first. If we're not providing the people that are doing these projects with the information they need to be successful, then I think that us as a city or as a work group, we're not doing our part of that team. So the correction notice is kind of part of what we consider to be the first step in education. And then after a correction notice, we may issue a stop work order. There are fines associated with both the stop work order and within code for violations. But you always have the right to appeal. We're not, we're all human. Our inspectors could possibly make a mistake, not Chaclon, but everybody else could possibly make a mistake. So there, you can't appeal any of our decisions. I mean, you would still have to stop and go through the appeals process, but it's not, it wouldn't hurt my feelings if you did that. That's how, in the city, that's how we make exceptions. That's how we make sure that the rules are working for everybody. So appeals are a good thing sometimes. And we also will be tracking repeat offenders. This will be going for this and erosion control as well. So a correction notice, the purpose of this is to cite, we'll start back. The purpose of the citation provision is to discourage responsible parties from knowingly violating the rules, and that's the key word. Knowingly and intentionally violations are what's going to bump you right up to that $5,000 fine that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. But we also allow those simply who are not aware of the rules to be educated. A correction notice will be issued to all first-time offenders. First time, we want to make sure that you know what happened, why it happened, and what the rules are that were broken that put you in this position. We also, like with erosion control, when we do these, we send out the links to the admin rule. We send out the links to the city code sections, and then make sure that you have any questions. That's our job. We're not just out there to write tickets and pencil pushers. We actually want to help everybody work, and I know that's not always what people see inspectors as, but our crew, that's what we do. That's our number one thing. So BDS will issue a correction notice stating the provisions violated. The site development inspector will determine which parties are responsible. So we could say if it's the contractor, if the demo manager did everything right, the contractor just decided that they were going to go off and do something different, we can find the contractor. We can go back to the demo manager, or if there was an issue with the application, we could go back to the applicant. Ultimately, though, the owner of that property, if let's say something happened and you did not want to pay those fees and it continued on, the owner will come back to the owner of that property with liens and fees. So, if corrections aren't made and the violations continue, then we may impose additional citations or stop work orders. Those are all in section 3.3040 City Code. Stop work orders. We may issue a stop work order for 24.55 requiring that this immediately all work stop except work that's directly related to remediation of violation. And that's key, because we can come out and say you can stop now and you can start cleaning up, or you can stop now and you can start fixing this problem. We're not wanting this thing to set and be an issue. We want the problem fixed, just like everybody else does. So those stop work orders will come with some additional fees if we receive a complaint. There will be an investigation fee, and it will be a $500 stop work order fee with that. So the fines that are in Title 24 for the specific violations of the admin, your first offense, this is after the correction notice has been issued. If you have another problem after that first offense, that's going to be a $5,000 fine. Your second offense is going to be a $10,000 fine, and the third offense is going to be $15,000. Now, keep in mind that if there are other violations, say violations of erosion control code, those violations are separate, so it's per violation. You'll have the Title 24, which is going to be $5,000, but you may have other fees that are going to be assessed for any other violations that occur. If it's a discharge to the storm sewer or to VES's system, that will be referred to VES, and that's going to be a completely different compliance process. So keep that in mind. That's not just that $5,000 that can somewhat add up, but we hope that this doesn't ever happen. This isn't something we want to do. but it's there just in case. So the third offense, additional violations at the third offense are going to be set at the maximum amount per individual violation allowed by the fee schedule. Fines must be paid and received by the Bureau of Development Services within 15 days. If this citation is not paid, then the fines indicated will double. Administrative rule for demolitions that became effective July 1st, and any unpaid citation amounts, unpaid citation amount may, at the discretion of the director, be assessed as a lien against the property. So that's where the owner should be getting involved. Anytime we do, we will copy the owners that they are kept in the loop. Doing this for 13 years, I've learned that a contractor may not want to go tell the owner that they had a violation. So it's important that we copy everything. Tracking repeat offenders. So we have a database that's working for repeat offenders. If you have a violation, your name will go on that database. Every time we have a violation, we will check against that to see if this is your first, second, or third. And that will continue to carry on. So multiple citations can be issued. This is what we were talking about a while ago for violations of Erosion Control Code, Title 17. So keep that in mind. Let's go back to this, the very last section of that where it says each day of noncompliance may be considered a separate violation. So if we tell you there's a problem, you blow that off, continue working, the next day we come out, you're still doing that, that will be considered a separate violation. So you can have a first violation, a second violation in consecutive days. The appeals process, for me, it's one of the most important parts of what we do. So if you disagree with what we're telling you is a problem and you have the code to back it up or the documentation to back up how that was not a violation or how do you feel, make sure you get all that turned in within that 15 calendar days. And there is a fee for appeals. If you come out for on the good side of the appeal, that will be refunded. The responsible party may appeal the written administrative rule. And that is the end of that part of the presentation. So I did have a few things that we wanted to cover right quick. We have time, but we did only have 2 minutes. So I'd like, if anybody's here that is currently going through the application process, I want to make myself available after this. And we can talk about maybe what problems you're having with the demo plan or with the process. I hope it's not a complaint for them. I hope it's really more of a work with you for them. So I'll be here, I'll be available. So I guess we'll give this back to, who's taking it from here? I guess it's me, that's the end of it. Any questions?
I have a couple questions. One is the posting of the signs, the 300-foot perimeter. Does that include in apartment buildings? Do you have to put them on each individual apartment door, or how does that work?
So this is kind of between me and Jeremy. So inspections are going to be the folks who are going to be verifying the posting requirements when, I think at the time of your 200. But the code as it's written says properties within 300 feet. We're going to give you a map with the primary address of that property and the tax account number and the map. So you're going to have 3 points of information to reference where you need to do those postings. In terms of how Jeremy is going to be following up, or the other inspectors are going to be following up on where you put those door hangers on the properties, how you effectively notify those properties, I would turn that over to him at this point.
Yeah, so basically we're going to ask, did you do your postings? We, as inspectors, do not have time to go to door to door on those 300 sites and make sure that they were posted. But we have had some concerns called in this early on process about if you can't reach, get onto the property, if it's, there's dogs there, or you're concerned for your safety. Those are the kind of things, you leave that hanger where you can and you document, write it down at this address. We couldn't get to the door, but we did leave the property, did leave it at the property. So again, just do what we can, make sure we're documenting it.
Okay, my second question is, how can a rain event affect your demolition?
So rain event affecting demolition, you're getting free water, and you're getting your free wetting at that point. But at that point, you would want to make sure you're going into erosion control mode, erosion and sediment control mode. You want to make sure that nothing's flowing off the site, that you have your BMPs ready to go or in place for the storm event. That's really the only thing that's going to affect it. I mean, If it came in with some wind, then yes, that would shut you down, but if you have nothing coming off the site, and that may take a little bit of ingenuity, how do we do that? I do have some ideas of how we can have some perimeter controls that could be used as a settling pond, so we can always talk about that in the future. But yeah, that's about it. Yeah. I'm going to try to branch out. Sorry.
Did I hear correctly that this SB 871 only applies to a demolition before 1979?
Yeah, 1979 and back.
Okay.
Any of those structures that were built before.
Second part of my question, when does it only kick in when you're affecting the exterior of the building, or does it occur on the interior as well?
Yeah, so it's a demolition. So our term for demolition would mean that it had to be
A full demo?
a full demo, yeah.
Okay, in the
So-
beginning it said it separated that it included a full demo, and one of the slides said that
Some deconstruction was also something that was
it said something.
noted in there.
I thought.
Okay, well, maybe we can
So I
go
just wanted
back
to
there and
clarify,
check.
okay.
So on that note, what, just a portion of the home?
If it's a portion of home, then that does not count as a full demolition.
It all has to be a
Right,
full
Nancy?
demolition.
Maybe I just.
So if it meets the city's definition of demolition, then you have to do, meet those requirements. If it's a major alteration and you're using mechanical equipment to demolish a portion of the structure, then you just need to do the dust control piece. I can talk to you if you have any specific questions later on that.
But is that going to require a permit for that portion?
For the portion of the property that you're demoing, it wouldn't be kicked into this because it would be considered an MRAA, but the inspector for that should still be checking for that.
Gotcha.
That's my understanding. From,
I actually have a question for permitting purposes. Sorry. In regards to a demo having to be final before a permit can be applied for the new build, is
So
it
it's-
actually being applied for and submitted?
It's not for application. So for new construction on a site where there's a building that's going to be demolished, where SB or Title 24.55.205 is going to be in place for that demolition, you can apply for your new construction permit. We're gonna tag that there's a structure that's going to be subject for a demolition permit with these requirements. That means that new construction permit is going to be held up. It won't enter pre-issuance until the demo is finalized. Okay, so it can come under review. You can even bring in your new construction permit before you apply for your demo, but we're screening for that at the setup of the new construction permit to see when these requirements are going to apply, so we can hold that new construction permit out of pre-issuance before it's issued until the demo is finalized.
anything else for planning?
Demolition manager has to be lead and asbestos certified.
Either the demolition manager needs those. So the question was, does the demolition manager have to be lead and asbestos certified? You have the two options of the demolition manager can have those, or you can designate the contractor to have those.
So what are the certs and how and where do you get them?
The asbestos cert is the HERA building inspector. There's several in that series. You have the inspector, the supervisor, the worker. You can have any of those. And on the lead side, it's the same kind of process. You have the renovator, you have the manager side.
And the links are embedded in here to look those up. So towards the beginning, you'll see links for that. So just when this gets onto our website, which should be today, you can just go and click on those links, and it'll also link you to who provides those certifications and how you can get the classes.
And I checked Oregon Health Authority's website this morning, and they have a schedule of lead classes all the way through November. If people are trying to get in classes, they're pretty regular. Our inspectors, we all took classes, and the main classes, or the entry-level class, is just an 8-hour, one-day class. So those should be pretty good.
So you noted that the demolition manager has to note the wind speed and monitor if they find anything else? Is there a specific form or?
No, not at
check
this.
all of that?
Not at this point. You can use a spiral notebook or a 3-ring binder.
You're not going to be looking at for that.
We will check that,
So he
especially
does
if we
have to
have a
have a-
complaint. We will be checking that. that, just like we do with erosion control. We'll check that. That's going to be our go-to document to see what you've done. There's always two sides of a complaint. There's the person who sees it, and there's the person who's dealing with it.
So basically, they need to keep a folder with
Right.
all of this. And what if they find something, and how do they know if they find something?
So-
How do they test it on site?
If they have, they don't test it on site, it just needs to be, so the person who has their AHERA, their asbestos, they should know how to handle that situation. They would contain the material, and then get it remediated and fill out the paperwork as needed.
Suspected material at that point.
Suspected
And then
material.
you stop.
Right. And you just need to get that out of the demolition area and make sure that there's nothing else in there, and then you can start back up.
So we had a lot of hands. Let's go in order. I saw them come out back
Thank
row.
you.
Nathan standing in the back. Mike and Ed.
I'd like to know if you guys are going to give preference when we call in the 200 inspection so that we get those early in the morning so we're not waiting around until 1 o'clock in the afternoon before we can start work.
Yeah, preference is kind of hard. I mean, everybody deserves the inspection they called in for. And the way our inspectors work is we have a route. You know, we can't drive all the way out to Southeast 158th and then our next inspection be in North Portland. That's not a good use of our time or the city's money. So it will have to.
So what you're saying is that causing delays to private individuals is a much more preferential option to causing delays to the government.
So if what I'm saying is you're asking for us to cause a delay to another individual because you feel like your project should be first. That's what I'm saying. It's not, even right now, we don't do that. You know,
Well, I guess I would just like to bring to your attention that this thing of calling the 200 in for the day you want to start it is similarly unpractical.
Okay. We'll take that. Next.
I'm gonna just side with him on that.
Okay.
I think they'll be in the same situation.
Right. All right. Yep. And we have that same situation with the erosion control inspections now. You're not supposed to start ground disturbing activity until you get your 200 approved. So, I mean, if you want to do this for the day before you start and you have everything staged, that's fine. But we want to see everything staged. You know, if that's your plan. So we'll go from there.
I haven't read the entire SB deal. Is abatement before we come in for permit application a Portland adaptation of this, or is that part of the actual
So anytime
actual
you're doing
rule?
demolition, you should be doing that abatement and check before you start that permitting process. Is that correct? See, that's how it's worked in the past.
Yeah, so if you're talking about the asbestos abatement,
Yes.
that's required right now under state law. All we're doing on the asbestos piece is we're saying we're gonna get a copy of the asbestos survey, which you're already required to do and you have been.
Correct. I guess the issue that we see is when you have abatement before you can even come in for a demo permit, abatement can often be very invasive and render a house unlivable, where you might have had another 3 to 6 months of a house being rented in the market if you can abate the asbestos after demo issuance. So I don't know what, it seems off to have abatement required before we can even come in with a demo permit, because it renders that house unoccupied from the day we come in as opposed to the day we get the demo permit.
We haven't changed those requirements. I don't know, Zeb, if you wanna chime in on that.
No, not really. I'm Zeb Bates. I'm the DEQ Northwest Region Asbestos Inspector. You're required to have asbestos abatement conducted prior to demolition. When you decide to schedule that, it's strictly up to you.
But this process requires abatement to be done before we apply for a permit. This process is saying before we demo. So I'm saying, why is there not a process for us to say, we have an issued demo, before you do anything else, you have to have the abatement completed and an inspection called, and then you can move forward with your other inspections, instead of requiring that abatement before we even bring paperwork into the city.
So part of this is we review that asbestos survey and we review what was found and where it was found. So that's one of the key things that we're looking at.
I'm not talking about survey. No problem with survey. I'm talking about abatement. A survey doesn't make a house unlivable. Abatement can.
They're specifying like constructive
deconstructive abatement, or not abatement, but survey as well, so it may cause the same problem you're looking for.
Yeah, so if you're going through a limited survey, I don't see why sometimes people couldn't still be in that building if you're doing a limited survey. You're just going through and checking all the materials. If you're doing a comprehensive survey, then that would be where that would come into play. But that's, that's up to you guys how you're going to handle that. But that's one of the requirements. So.
I still don't think you've understood the question. The question is, does the abatement have to be completed prior to submission of the application?
Yes, if you find asbestos, that we're expecting the forms that show that you've removed that asbestos and that it's been abated.
Prior to even submitting a demolition application?
Yes.
So you're rendering the house unlivable even before you...
Right, so if you want to talk about maybe exceptions or whatever in the future, or what this issue might be, we could talk about that outside of here, let some other questions go. But yeah, we'll entertain those, your suggestions. That's, yeah.
Jeremy, I brought this up a couple of times, but it doesn't sound like it's being addressed correctly. I think you ought to schedule those 200 inspections a couple of days. Let somebody go in a couple of days down the road and schedule for a given time and get back to them and lock that in. Because it makes no sense to stage something, have 3 or 4 trucks sitting out there, maybe a couple of drop boxes, a water truck, and excavation equipment, waiting to find out whether you're going to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So,
right.
So what you ought to be, what you should do is let somebody call in, set a date, get back to them, and a couple days down the road, you get back to them, confirm that the second guy set his date, you confirm that, rather than maybe 3 guys or 4 guys calling in on the same day wanting inspections.
So yeah, the way that the inspection requests are now, you can call in, set it up for a week in the future, you can call it in, and the way that we do those inspections is when we get that request in the morning, we set that route. All you have to do is leave a voicemail saying, please call me, let me know what time you're going to be here so I can have people on site. That's simple, we do that now. There's no problem with that. You don't have to sit there and wait unknowingly all day. Just leave a voicemail saying, I need to know what time, an idea of what time you're going to be here, and we give you that window. That's the best that we can do. That's treated just like every other project is treated, plumbing and anything.
Right, so, but with this pre-construction, the 200 for the demo, the way it was let it be read in the presentation is that we need to be on site when that inspection occurs.
Yep.
As where with the other inspections, as long as work's complete of a code, we don't have to meet anybody. You give us a slip and we fix our boo-boos or whatever.
Right.
So this is,
it's slightly different. Yeah, we need to confirm that you guys that we're all on the same page, and we need to confirm those certifications. There are differences from those inspections, and that's why a lot of the trades inspections, they have to have that inspector there when they do them. I mean, that's their worker there for that inspection. That's just the way that's going to work. But yeah, schedule an inspection for that day. Leave us a voicemail on that inspection saying, call me an hour ahead. We do that now. It's perfectly fine.
I'd like to clarify, can the demolition manager be an employee of the contractor, or must it be third party?
Yep, it could be anybody.
As long as they're
As long and they don't have to have the certifications again. If the contractor has those certs, then the demo manager will have to have it. They're just a responsible party. Yes, sir.
Back to the first question, posting of all the 300, where we have to go around it. So if you've got an apartment building next door, you have 200 units there, are you going to post the front door? You have to post all 200 units. The building security can't get inside. This is a real critical question because.
So the code itself, and we have copies of it here that you can read yourself. It just references the property. So if you're going to post the lobby, that door that everybody's walking through, or you hand it to the security desk that's going to let everybody know so they can post it for other people to see, the code references the property. We don't know how many people live there, how many different households are there. We can't get at every single person within those 300 feet. So the code references the properties.
You're going to tape it on the front door, take a picture, and say, hey, I did it, and the first guy goes by, rips it off, then...
I would suggest that you actually make contact with that property manager. Most apartment complexes are going to have somebody, whether it be a maintenance. whether it be the maintenance manager or the office manager, make sure, and then they can tell everybody, but make sure you're getting it to somebody in that apartment complex. Yes?
Nancy, excluded out, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a commercial property that has one apartment in it, is that correct? If you have a commercial property that has an apartment in it, no matter how big that commercial property is, it has an apartment, does it have to go through this process or not?
So it's the 1 to 4 unit structure. So it
Commercial structure with a 1 unit in it. Example, my office
Yeah.
has a apartment in the bottom and basement.
right, no.
It's commercial building. And
That is
commercial.
excluded. Is that, yes, that is excluded. Correct, yeah. Any questions?
I have one more question. If you're expecting the demo to start as soon as possible after the 200 inspection, are those going to take priority where it comes to inspection days getting bumped? Because there's a lot of setup.
We don't, I mean, I don't know what you mean, Bob, but like rollovers, like,
Right.
we don't have that issue. I mean, currently, we don't have that issue, so we get to them the day that they're called. So, but when I say that I expect that demolition to start when I walk away, I say that as inspectors, I mean, it doesn't have to start right away, but that's the way it should be staged, that's what we think. And we've learned this in the past with the erosion control inspections. We can be out on that site and say, okay, well, your sediment bin still needs to be installed in this portion. Do that before you start. We walk away. Hour later, we get a call from, a concern called in saying there's mud pumping out to the street. It's full. That's why we're requiring this to happen like that, because we know from past experience that if it's not there and it's not done when we're on site, there's a good chance it's not going to get done. And we want to make sure that everybody has every chance not to get that first spot. That's what we're looking for. So.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because I know you're saying that we're not having the bump issues, right, the rollover issues, but we have had significant rollover issues recently.
In the past, and I don't know what work group you were working with rollovers, but as far as erosion control goes, only time we have ever had rollovers was when I was the only inspector and I had to be out of the office.
I'm just thinking general inspections.
Yeah, general inspections, I'm not sure, but for site development, rollovers have not been an issue. We hired 1, 2, 3, we have 4 inspectors because of this, and we're staffing for that. So.
How high does the vertical protection have to go up, less than 10 feet?
It should go up to the top of the area that you're removing this stuff from. So it can go right to the roof, to the gutters, to the
as high as the peak of the roof.
No, to the edge of the. Yeah. So if you took the lead class, if you're removing a window, and you can do that right at the top of the window, and you're containing that area, that's perfectly fine.
But if you're taking the whole building down, then it has to go up to the height.
Right, it should go up to the
eave, not to the peak of the roof.
No, I mean, where you're removing those items from is what it needs to contain. There would be no reason to go all the way up to the peak, so. Yes, ma'am.
But the vertical is only required if you can't go out
Less than 10
horizontally.
feet. Yeah.
Right, if you can't get your 10 feet horizontally, then you have to go over it.
Sometimes it needs attached to it, when you build in, or suspend it on scaffold.
Right, yeah, and that's why there's so much leeway on how that's gonna actually be done, so. Anybody else?